student, I'm Mr. Liang. So in this video, we are going to talk about the MC questions in chapter 16, coordination in humans. So in the first MC question is talking about which of the following gives the correct direction of nerve impulse transmission in one neuron. So you can see that in ABCD, you can find the structure of one single neuron, as shown, cell body, and the dendrites. So let's take this chance to recall the structure of a neuron. So in the neuron, it consists of the cell body and a number of nerve fibers. So for the nerve fibers, there are two types. One main type is the dendron, and with the small branches, we call it dendrites. And the other type is axon. Both of them, they can transmit nerve impulse. But when we are talking about transmission, we need to think about the direction. For the axon, easy way to remember is that A for away. It's just like the artery, A for away. So axon, it can transmit the nerve impulses away from the cell body. And the dendron, it can transmit the nerve impulses towards the cell body. So after that, we can see that it must be the transmission direction from the dendron or dendrites to the dendron to the cell body and then to the axon. You take a look at the question, so we can see that the dendrites, they will transmit the nerve impulse to the cell body and then transmit to the axon and away from the cell body. So that's what the answer is. So after talking the first MC question, I would like to recall one more thing. It's talking about the transmission of nerve impulses between neurons. So in the question, we are talking about in one neuron. But what about is talking about in between the neurons? So the first idea is that the nerve impulses cannot travel directly from one neuron to another because there is a narrow gap at the site where the nerve fibers of adjacent neurons meet. So that's why the axons of one neuron, it is not directly connecting with another neuron's dendrites. So that's why there is a gap. We call it synapse in between the neurons. When you are doing the revision, okay, about the nerve impulse transmission, don't just think about in one neuron. You also need to think about in between the neurons, and we call the concept in this page for the synapse. So for the second question, it's talking about the research has shown that drugs abuse cause damage to the nervous system, and it will lead to speech disorders and memory degenerations. So that means someone cannot speak properly. They may speak like this, okay? Or you may not clearly hear, okay, what they are saying, something like this. So, and memory degeneration, they cannot memorize things properly. So which parts of the nervous system shown below are likely to be damaged by the drugs abuse? So for the labeling, PQR. So for P, cerebrum, Q, cerebellum, and R, medulla oblongata. So that's why you need to recall the basic functions of these three parts first in order to answer the question. So for the from the syndromes, we can see that memory degeneration. So very easy idea. It must be the association area in our cerebrum to be damaged. So that's why P must be one of the answer. But actually, we cannot see that there is a choice talking about P only. So that's why we need to think about one more choice, Q or R. Q is cerebellum, R is medulla oblongata. So you can see that for the medulla oblongata, so it's mainly responsible for the involuntary actions. For example, breathing and heartbeat, and is also a reflex center for different types of reflex action. So actually, for medulla oblongata is not talking about our speech disorders. So that's why R is not correct. So how about cerebellum? Cerebellum is talking about the coordination of muscular movements. So that's why it's a very precise movement of the muscle. For example, our finger, we take a pen to write something, to draw something, okay, to do a very, very precise work. Or for our facial muscle, or for our tongue, or for our lips. When we are talking, when we are speaking, actually we use all those muscles in our face. Our facial muscle, our lips, our tongue, okay? So they need to coordinate very well in order to speak clearly. Otherwise, you may hear something like this. You cannot really clearly listen to what I'm saying. So that's the problem of the speech disorder. Okay, so that's why for the answer it must be P and Q, and answer A is correct. So for the third question, it's talking about the spinal cord, and ABCD is that which of the following statement about the spinal cord is correct. So for the diagram, okay, good practice. W, X, Y, Z. W, ventral root. Z, dorsal root ganglion. How can I know that? Because it is a swollen part and it is containing the cell body of the sensory neuron. So you can see from this simple diagram. For the dorsal root ganglion, it contains the cell body of many sensory neurons grouped together. So that's why it's a swollen part. And then for part X, it is a white matter containing the nerve fiber, because in the nerve fiber is surrounded by the myelin sheath. Myelin sheath is a fatty tissue, so that's why the color is a bit pale, a bit white. And then for part Y, it is the gray matter, and it contains the cell body of motor neurons and interneurons. So after you can label all the structures, so we can go to the questions. So for answer A, motor neurons are found in part W, and it is the correct answer because for the part W, which is the ventral root, and for the ventral root, it really contains the nerve fiber of our motor neuron. So that's why answer A is correct. And then for answer B is wrong. Why? Interneurons are found only in part X, so as what we know that part X is a white matter. Actually, it should contain the nerve fiber rather than the interneurons. So the interneurons should be found in the part Y. It should be in the gray matter. And then for answer C is also wrong. Part X has more genetic material, so that's the DNA, okay, than part Y. So for part Y, it should be the gray matter, and the gray matter is containing the cell body of motor neuron and interneuron. And then what we know that is for the genetic material, the DNA, they can be found in our nucleus, and the nuclei, they can be found in the cell bodies. So more genetic material should be found in part Y rather than in part X. So that's why answer C is wrong. And answer D, the direction of impulse transmission is from W to Z, actually is also wrong. Why do we need to label dorsal root and ventral root? So when we take a look at the diagram of the spinal cord, we can see that the dorsal root is containing the sensory neuron, and for the ventral root is containing the motor neuron. So for the direction, the clear idea should be that the nerve impulses should be traveled from the sensory neuron in the dorsal root and then go into the part Y, that means the inner part of the spinal cord, and then travel to the ventral root, which is containing the motor neuron. So the direction should be from the back side to the front side. Okay, so that's why it should be from Z to W instead of from W to Z. So that's why answer A is the correct answer. So for these two questions, we are talking about the neurons in our nervous system, and we can see the spinal cord and our brain, and there are some neurons here. So for this part, the very first idea is that you need to distinguish the dorsal root and ventral root first. So for question 1, a person touches a hot object and withdraws his arm immediately. So how many neurons are involved in this action? So obviously it's a withdrawal reflex, and in this reflex action, okay, the neural path consists of 3 types of neurons. They are the sensory neuron, they are the interneuron, and the motor neuron. So that's why there are 3 neurons are involved in this reflex action. And then for question 2, which of the following is connected to the type of neuron which is the same as X? Neuron X, this neuron, what is it? So remember that, okay, I tell you guys to distinguish the dorsal root and ventral root in this diagram first, because for the neuron X, it is in the ventral root, and that's why it is a motor neuron. And after we know that it is a motor neuron, we can know which type of the tissue should be connected to the motor neuron. It should be a effector, because the motor neuron can transmit the nerve impulse to the effector. So I would like to talk about option C and D first. Option C is wrong, because for the tooth, actually it should contain the receptor rather than effector, because in the pulp cavity, we learned it before, there are different type of receptor, maybe for temperature, maybe for the mechanics, that means the touching or some chemicals. So that's why it's not the effector. So option C is wrong. And then for option D, the taste bud. Taste bud, it contains a lot of taste receptor cells, so that's why it's not effector at all. And then for option B, the pupil is also wrong. Although you think that pupil is a tiny hole for the light to enter the eyes, and then we can control the size of the pupil. So that's why a pupil can be regarded as a effector, isn't it? Of course not. Actually, the pupil is not an effector. Pupil is just a tiny hole. And actually the size of the pupil is under the control of the iris muscle. The iris muscle is the effector. So that's why answer B is also wrong. And then answer A is correct. Why? The skin, you may think that for the skin there should be some receptor for the temperature change, for the touching, something like this. But in our skin, there are also some muscles as an effector. They can erect the hairs when the temperature suddenly drops. So that's why we can feel that once we enter the room, okay, and the air conditioner is turned on, and then we feel very, very cold, and then we can feel the hair on our skin, okay, they erect, because there are some erector muscles in our skin to control this movement of our hairs. So that's why A is the answer. For these two questions, it's talking about the hormonal coordination, and the first part is talking about which of the following statements about hormonal coordination is correct. Answer A, all hormones are protein. So it is wrong, because actually not all hormones are protein. Some hormones such as insulin and glucagon, they are made up of protein, yes. However, some hormones such as the sex hormones, they are made up of lipids. So that's why A is wrong. And then B, a hormone only act on one target organ is also wrong, because some hormones, for example insulin, they can act on the liver cells and muscle cells. So that's why more than one target organs already. So that's why B is wrong. And then C, a small amount of hormone is needed for its action. That's correct. Although the hormones, they are carried in the blood and travel along in the body, they only act on the specific cells in target organs. You can take a look at this part. The general functions of the hormones, they serve as chemical messengers that act on specific cells in target organs. So that's why we don't need a large amount of hormones to stimulate the target organs. So that's the concept of option C. So and then for option D is talking about an endocrine gland can produce only one kind of hormone, and it's also wrong, because the pancreas is a very common endocrine gland we study in this topic. So pancreas can secrete insulin and glucagon to control the blood glucose level. So that's why the endocrine gland, okay, actually some of them, they can produce more than one kinds of hormones. So in this question, one reminder or one technique I would like to tell you is that once you read the options and then you read the word or, only, so you need to be very, very careful. And also some other words you also need to become very, very careful. For example, once you see that something, or you see that the word must or may, Okay, so those words you need to be very careful to read the sentence, okay, twice or even twice to make sure that it's really the correct concept. And then for question 2, a hormone differs from an enzyme in that. So for the first answer, option A is not made up of protein is not correct, because for enzyme they are all made up of protein. That's correct, the enzymes. But for the hormone, some of them they are also made up of protein, and some of them they are made up of lipids. So that's why if option A is correct, it sounds like that all the hormones they are not made up of protein. But actually that's not the case. Some hormones they are made up of protein. So that's why option A is wrong. And then option B is produced by gland is also wrong, because both hormones and enzymes they are produced by the gland. So for the hormones they are produced by the endocrine gland, for example pancreas. But at the same time, the enzymes they are also produced by the gland, because for the pancreas is also a type of exocrine gland. It's also a type of gland. So it can produce the amylase, produce the protease for digestion, right? So that's why B is wrong. And then C is carried by blood to the target organ. It is correct, because for the enzymes, for example, the digestive juice, for the digestive enzyme, you will not expect that those digestive enzymes can be carried in your blood, because somehow it will digest the protein, digest the lipids, okay, in the blood. So it's not very favorable. And then for D, it can the hormones it can catalyze a wide range of the metabolic reactions. Is also wrong, because the misconception is the verb catalyze. So because the hormone is different from the enzyme, it cannot speed up those reactions, so that's why it cannot use the verb catalyze. So which type of verb we can use to describe the action of the hormone? We can use the word promote, we can use the word enhance, okay, or we can use the word inhibit. It's also the verbs we can use to describe the action of the hormone, but never catalyze. Okay, so that's the MC in chapter 16. So if you have any question, please leave it below. I will answer you as soon as possible. See you next time. Bye bye.